for taking the time to join the internal communication series that I run on my blog. This is a long-running series with thought leaders on various topics related to internal communication. So thank you again for taking the time. Before we get started, it'll be great if you could quickly introduce yourself for our audience.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. It's a pleasure. I am a longtime communicator across a couple of professions. So I was a broadcast journalist, news director, anchor, reporter for years. And then I started my own communications consulting and training business in 2000 called Chase Media. So I really have always had a love of working with people in terms of communication skills and helping them convey their messages in a way that resonates with other people, creates meaning, creates understanding. So whether it was on one side of the microphone or the other, just helping people learn how to communicate in a way that really resonates.
Fantastic. And I know you're an expert in strategic storytelling, and that's the reason why I wanted you on my show. So if you could give me a quick background on what is your understanding of strategic storytelling and what are some of the key components of it?
Strategic storytelling really is all about conveying a business message using a personal story, so a personal experience that you've had. And the reason it's so powerful is that it's actually, we're hardwired to tell stories and to listen to stories. You know, fables and all the messages that we learn through just sort of fairy tales and that kind of thing. We remember all of those. We remember those messages. So using a personal story to convey a business message, and the two most important things in that, the components of that are being very purposeful and being very engaging. So purpose and engagement together. So how do you decide what message you want to convey? Well, look at what really the outcome you're looking for. What do you want people to know, think, understand, feel, or do? So what do you want them to, how do you want them to engage? What action do you want them to take after you convey a story to help them understand the importance of what you're doing? So it's not a story that you tell down at the pub, it's a business story.
Got it. And, you know, despite, you know, the fact that people know the importance of storytelling, why is it so difficult for leaders and managers not to be able to tell them?
That's a really good question. And I believe because we've had this historic mindset of personal is personal, business is business, and never the twain shall meet, right? Well, in this day and time when people more than ever before are looking for authenticity and trustworthiness and really, you know, clarity in communication, that's, you know, that's what storytelling is all about. If you tell me a personal story about an experience you've had and what you learned from it, or why I should care about your story and what you want me to do with that information, then I'm already trusting you more than you know, just that command and control, do it because I said to, right? Remember the days of, you know, don't ask me why, just, you know, and do as I say, not as I do, all of that sort of the mentoring that we had doesn't really work, right? So if you want to keep your best employees engaged, you really build a relationship with them. And we have to get over that, I guess, that mindset of separating ourselves, our humanity, really. We're all human, and we have to connect with other people in a human way.
Fantastic. And, you know, there is this thinking that storytelling is very fluffy and there's no way to measure the success of it. So how do you go about, what are the ways to measure success of storytelling?
Well, you know, it's more of it's not a cause and effect. It's not a cause and effect situation. It's more of a component, shall we say. So you can measure the success of your employee engagement. You can measure the success of their work and their loyalty, really. And that is all about how you communicate with them. So it's part of that greater strategic approach you have when you engage with your stakeholders, with your employees. If they're feeling more motivated, more engaged, more part of a greater good, if you will, with your organization, that's going to come from your communication skills, and your communication skills are such the key to everything. I mean, how many successful organizations are there for the long term with poor communicators at the helm? Leaders have to be good communicators, and that drives culture, right? Professional communication is part of the culture. So it's just a really critical component in the overall strategic success of your organization.
Right. And, we say that employees are our greatest brand ambassadors and advocates, but, what can we do to inspire them to tell effective stories? And, and there is always this disconnect between, the organization's brand and the employee's personal brands. And where do you draw the line?
Well, I don't know that you draw the line. I think you draw together.
Right.
You engage with them. So we've all had experiences as a child. There's that common humanity across just, our lives, right? And we can always pull from those experiences about lessons learned, people we've looked up to and why they inspired us. So just telling simple stories about your company values. So you can put your values on the wall, and here are our company values and our mission and our vision and our purpose. Tell me a story about why I should care about that and what that really means to you, so that you are role modeling those values, right? So for instance, through our workshops, we've had a lot of leaders come through, and we had a woman come through who really wanted to have her teams value integrity. So integrity was a key value, a key company value. And more than just saying, always do the right thing and have that on the wall with your values, she told the story about her father. So her father was quite the swimmer. He was on the way to the Olympics when he was a teenager. And so his last qualifying meet, she came up with this story. So she said, my dad was a professional swimmer, and he was on his way to the Olympics when he was a teenager. And in his last meet, he took off out of the blocks. He was 7 lengths ahead. He was going gangbusters. He was on his way to really go to the Olympics, right? It was a sure thing. So he was doing his turn, and this was back before they had the technology where you can tell if they touched the wall. And he barely missed the wall.
Okay.
He knew he had a split second to decide, I missed the wall. Do I go back and touch it and probably lose the meet? So he did. He went back and touched the wall. Never went to the Olympics. He lost by 7 lengths. But he would always tell his children and her, obviously, that he never regrets that.
Right.
And she said, I'm sharing this story with you today because when I think of integrity, I think of my dad. And in business, we're all going to come to those moments, our touch the wall moments, where we have a choice of doing the right thing or maybe not. So when I think of integrity, I think of my dad, and I encourage you to do the same thing. So what's happened with that is that it makes decision-making go faster. She said her team knows when they come to, well, it's sort of the right thing, or we could get by with it. That's not an option. It's either the right thing or not the right thing. And so they have their touch the wall moments. And so it's little things like that, those experiences we have, instead of just telling people, go and do the right thing. You remember that story, and it inspires you, right? And inspires you to want to do the right thing.
Brilliant, brilliant. That's a great example. And that alludes to my next question. And I think you partly answered it. Is there any example from your consulting work where, organizations you've seen which really does storytelling brilliantly well?
More and more, it's across industries and disciplines. It's just pretty amazing what's happening with, with storytelling. And we have to be really clear what storytelling is and what it's not. It's quite the buzzword, right? Using stories and storytelling. And a lot of times it's really just kind of the brand narrative or the marketing piece. It's not really a story unless
Yeah.
it really motivates people and it's coming from you, it's coming from your experience. Or,
Right.
as I just did, me
Mm.
sharing a story about someone who came through the workshop and came up with that story to
Mm.
motivate her team to be, always doing the right thing in
Right.
the company. And she was brilliant in realizing that it not only motivates her team when she shares those sorts of stories, but
Mm.
it really does increase the reputation across the whole organization. So
Mm.
she doesn't have to worry as much that there's some sort of nefarious activity going on, because
Right.
she has instilled that culture of integrity in her organization.
Got
But
it.
I'm seeing more and more of chief storytelling officers, CSOs,
Mm.
being
Right.
hired by big corporations, which is
Right.
pretty interesting.
Right. Absolutely. It's a great trend. And as we wrap up, Dianne, I just want to ask you, what's your advice for communicators, and how can they embed, strategic storytelling in their organizations?
I would just encourage some thought about how they want to attain their goals. What
Right.
is it they want to achieve? What is the business message? What is the value? What
Right.
is the origin story that you
Right.
can connect with? The origin story, as I always use in my consulting, my coaching,
Right.
uh, what do you want people to know about what you do,
Mm.
and why they should care about what you do,
Right.
so that you can reach your goals. And you do that when you connect. It's really, the neuroscience is fascinating, how our brains
Yeah.
work. So
Yeah.
when you just use facts and datas and case studies
Mm.
and white papers, it activates one part of your brain. Now, if
Right.
you embed that data or that fact in a
Mm.
personal story,
Mm.
the brain activates completely,
Right.
and you create a visual which
Right.
is processed faster and retained
Mm.
longer. So our
Good.
brains, again, are really hardwired for stories, which is a fascinating piece too.
Fantastic. Great. This.
There's all
Yeah.
sorts of places too that you can use stories. So you can use them in
Right.
presentations,
Yeah.
job interviews, sales
Right.
pitches, meetings, obviously,
Right.
one-on-one coaching, mentoring,
Right. Yeah.
and of course in the written format as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Brilliant. I mean, this brilliant, great insights. Thank you so much for taking the time to share these. And
Absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity. I really enjoyed it.
pleasure. Thank you.